Gazali. Today we have with us a very special guest, Mallika Sarabhai. I am particularly drawn to Mallika Sarabhai's family because of a very strong connection they have with Mahatma Gandhi. I have met her a few times. I have met her brother Kartikeya a few times. I must tell you a small story. Mahatma Gandhi started ashram in Ahmedabad when he arrived from South Africa, and that was in 1915. And this ashram was Kochrab, and about 30 inmates were there, and a yearly expenditure was about 7,000 rupees. And there was a Seth who had agreed to give this money. And then Mahatma Gandhi decided to invite an untouchable couple, a so-called untouchable couple with their daughter to stay at this ashram, Dadi Bhai, Dudi Bain, and their little daughter Lakshmi. And when this untouchable couple was invited, everybody protested, including Kasturba. And the one person who had agreed to fund refused to fund. He said, I'm not going to fund anymore because this is... And Gandhi was worried because there was not enough money to run the ashram, and a car stops. A gentleman comes, and he gives 13,000 rupees to Mahatma Gandhi, and that's the money which is sufficient for 2 years. And this gentleman is Mallika Sarabhai's grandfather, Ambalal Sarabhai. The whole family, his wife, Sarala Devi, she was very much connected with Gandhiji, was a freedom fighter. The sister was very special, Anusaya Bain, Ambalal's sister. She was a trade unionist, and the brother was a mill owner. And Gandhiji took money from Ambalal Sarabhai, but yet he led an agitation against the mill. Not exactly against, Gandhi was not against anybody. So this is a connection, and this kind of illustrates background. It's not only from the father's side, from the mother's side. Mother Mrinalini Sarabhai of Padma Bhushan, Mallika herself is Padma Bhushan. Her father Vikram Sarabhai is the father of space science in India, and he is Padma Vibhushan. But then even from the mother's side, Mrinalini Sarabhai, her aunt was Captain Lakshmi Saigal, who was the commander of the women's wing of Indian National Army of Subhash Chandra Bose. Mallika is a trained dancer, Kuchipudi and Bharatanatyam. She is a writer, a theatre person, an actress, an activist. She wears many hats. She right now runs an institution called Darpana Dance Academy, which was started by her parents. She is also into publishing. And we will come to all these aspects of her life, but let us start with Mallika. Having this kind of very special genes and very special parents, grandparents from both sides, how was it growing up, and what kind of memories you have of your parents, and what is in what way the family influenced what you are today?
I think the biggest influence was that nobody tried to influence. Mm-hmm. Whatever we learnt, I think, from observing and seeing what was not done that was different from, for instance, the families of our friends. Mm-hmm. Dadima used to always be in khadi, mm-hmm. wore no jewelry since I was a child, mm-hmm. and was very much the Sattvic woman. And therefore, to a young child, very boring. Mm-hmm. Because we were always, I was certainly being told, why do you wear bangles, or why do you wear this? Mm-hmm. So,
it's not... industrialist wife.
I was much closer to my grandfather. Mm-hmm. I was the youngest grandchild, and the little girl. Mm-hmm. So Dadaji and I were very close. I was very close to Mota Ben, Anasuya Sarabhai. Who used to always tell me that it was my mother from South India who brought culture to Gujarat. Okay. So she used to always say that, you're very fortunate because your mother represents everything that is valuable in India. Mm-hmm. The deepest culture, the deepest spirituality, the deepest poetry.
But
and so on.
Hussein Bain herself was a very special person.
She was an
I mean,
extraordinary
totally,
person.
Lived ahead of her time.
Oh, she was an extraordinary person. Even today, I think she would be considered forward for the age. She was a feminist, she was a suffragette, she joined the suffragette movement, she was a socialist, very strongly so, and learnt a lot of this when she was at the London School of Economics, and the suffragette movement was at its height. And so, yes, she was. And she and Dadaji adored each other. But when she decided on returning from England that Dadaji's workers were being ill-treated, she would leave by foot from the house. Dadaji would go out in his Daimler, and she would go to the workers' colony and picket outside Dadaji's house, Dadaji's office. But if you saw them in the house, there was never rancor, there was never any attempt by one to influence the other. And they were devoted to each other. One wouldn't eat without the other, and they were devoted. And I think that had a very strong influence on me, that nobody was trying to put their philosophy down somebody else's throat.
Other thing was they were very passionate. I mean, they had such concern for the nation, and that has permeated over generations.
Yes, I think it has. I think Amma used to always talk about nation building. And I saw her dancing and her choreography and the kind of subjects she took, which were completely out of the realm of Bharatanatyam or Kathakali, which were her two styles, talking about non-violence, talking about what was then not yet called dowry deaths, talking about issues of Dalit atrocities, talking about the environment. I mean, when the first environmental conference was held in Delhi in 1980, Amma was protesting the Silent Valley proposal to turn it into a hydel industry. And she had created a piece called Aspirations, which she performed at the conference. And the people who performed with her, I was not part of that, still talk about the reaction of the audience when in a particular sequence, Christ is hacked to death. And Amma says, "Father, forgive them not, for they do know what they do."
She also created a piece on dowry.
Yes, in 1960, absolutely. And the first...
Tell us about that.
Okay, so Amma didn't speak any Gujarati or Hindi when she married and came. So it was really when Kartikeya and I were in school that she started learning Gujarati. And she started learning through teachers appointed by people like Uma Shankar Joshi, our very famous poet, and Jayanti Dalal, our very famous writer. This was her clique. There were very few intellectuals who spoke English, but the ones who did were her introduction to Gujarat. So there was a teacher who used to come, and she would be made to read the newspapers. And she went on reading about young girls in Saurashtra, young married girls, jumping into a well to commit suicide. And she discussed it with her literature friends, and they explained to her that this was about dowry pressures. And she always said that whatever she felt strongly, she vomited out through dance. So she created this piece in 1963 called Memory is a Ragged Fragment of Eternity. And she didn't want it limited to an audience who spoke a particular language. So she didn't want it in Tamil and she didn't want it in Gujarati. So she created a language out of the bowls of Bharatanatyam, like Tadinginatom, Takita, Tadinginatom. And these are normally just bowls of what the mridangam is playing and don't have a meaning, but she imbued emotions on them so that the emotions became universally understood. So for instance, when the girls are mocking the newlywed, they go, now this is a language that's understood by anybody. And therefore she universalized it. And the story...
Art is anyway the universal language of mankind.
Yes, but you know, in dance, very often people will say, "Nahi, mujhe Tamil samajh mein nahi aata, na isliye mujhe to kuch bhi samajh mein nahi aata." We put up these barriers because we are told we need to understand art rather than have it hit our plexus. And therefore, it is we who create these barriers.
I also heard that because of this performance, Nehru really was impressed with it, and that perhaps led to the anti-dowry bill.
It did. It led to the first white paper on what this was, and the dowry death words didn't exist then. And then there was a Tamil Nadu minister who led a survey there, which led to the whole Salem deaths and the Salem killing of girl children. So it became a huge thing, and it became an issue to tackle. So I was always aware of dance and the arts being something that could draw attention to what people didn't want to talk about. So I was brought up in that. Papa, on the other hand, was very much for Swadeshi, very much for we will do our own thing. We are not going to copy anybody. We have to invent our own solutions. And I was sitting on Papa's lap when the first television, the PIJ experiment, which led to the whole ISRO and television for change and so on. I was sitting on his lap in a village when the first black and white box flickered. And I still get goosebumps thinking of the reaction of those who were sitting there, who were actually in the program and seeing themselves in this box. And I have subsequently done many thousand hours of work using television for social change.
3,000 hours to be precise.
That's right. And now using the internet, creating work for the internet to talk about issues as wide-ranging as gender politics for young children to climate change. So it has had I mean, both my parents have had a huge influence.
I think your family has been responsible for more institutions than perhaps any other family. You're talking about ISRO, NID, IIM, and many other institutions which were consolidated into the ISRO. Many institutions.
Many of them went into ISRO, but things like the Physical Research Laboratory or IIM are still independent institutes.
Tell me a little bit about your grandmother was fascinated by Montessori movement.
That's right.
And she got a special teacher from England to teach.
It's very funny. When the older children were born, there were 8 siblings. Dadaji and Dadima thought that they would best be educated in England. So they took the entire household and went to England to put the 3 eldest children in school. But within 2 days, they realized that the British children were calling them Blackie and Sooty, and they said, our children are not going to grow up with this. So they were on the way back, and on the ship, Dadima read an article by Madame Montessori and would have turned the ship around, was she able to. But wasn't, and she came back and she started corresponding with Madame Montessori, and Madame Montessori said, well, next time I have a workshop, come. So a year later, she and a teacher that she wanted trained went to England and did a workshop, and Madame Montessori suggested some teachers that she brought back, and in a house within the compound of the retreat, which was the family home, they started this Montessori school without the name of Montessori, and that's where all 8 children studied. And then one of them, Lena, actually when she grew up started what became the first official Montessori school, which was the school I went to, which is a school called Shreyas in Ahmedabad.
So what is interesting is coming from a mill-owners family, industrial family. I think your family is more known for education, institutions, art and culture. That's very interesting. Now you have been an actress. You have, I think, one of the most important role which you played was Draupadi in Peter Brook's Mahabharata. Tell us a little bit about this role, because that really put you out there.
You know, Draupadi has been a favorite character of mine since I was very young. And I always thought she was a very feisty woman and played things her way, basically, on her terms. And then I have never done professional theatre, or I hadn't. I'd done college theatre and I'd done an acting course at Darpana. And Bipin and I had just started Mappin Publishing. I was newly married. I was pregnant. When we started reading in the papers that this very famous theatre director called Peter Brook wanted to do an international production of the Mahabharata and had come to India to audition for either the role of Krishna or the role of Draupadi, because he thought those two could only uniquely come out of our culture. And Mrs. Popul Jaikar was put in charge of to seeing who was auditioned, and of course went to Bombay, Delhi, the usual places, Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, Bangalore and Chennai. And we were reading about this in the papers, and then I was 5 months pregnant and had very bad hepatitis. And I suddenly got a telegram from the cultural attaché at the French embassy saying, are you in Ahmedabad flying down with Peter Brook tomorrow? And I didn't know what. I mean, I thought they'd offer me some tiny role of a maid or something. And I remember coming, I was still very skinny because of the jaundice. I was completely yellow, but had hair down till here. And Peter and Jean-Claude Carrière and the assistant director they all came. And I spoke to them for 15 minutes, 20 minutes. They asked me if I had studied French, and I said, not except 1 year in college, and I speak no French. And then Peter turned to me and said, we would like you to audition for Draupadi. And what could I say? Anyway, over the next month, I flew to America, did my first set of auditions, then I was flown to Paris, and at 3 o'clock one morning, coming back to New York, I was offered the role. And then started the dilemma, because Bipin and I had just started mapping. And I was about to become a mother, and where was I going to go off for 2 years to Paris?
It was a pregnant Draupadi.
It was a pregnant Draupadi, and later it was a Draupadi on crutches because I broke my leg in the middle of it.
Okay.
But in many senses, I was glad that my family forced me to do it because I had many doubts. It was the most difficult period. I felt completely unmoored. But it is one of the things that changed me from being a dancer and an activist into becoming somebody who created her own work to use performance as a vehicle for social change.
Next was Shakti.
Yes, so Shakti came out of that. Because I came out of the 5 years of the Mahabharata thinking I can't go back to being a Bharatanatyam dancer. I have to talk about things that matter. And again, a theatre director friend forced me to become a creator. And Shakti, the Power of Women, which broke these silos of this is dance, this is theatre, this is music, this is mask work, and so on. And it became a one-woman show that I think changed many parameters in performance.
You had almost 500 performances.
I did, and from that came Sita's Daughters, which was then compulsory viewing for SARC judges.
Can you give a little bit of a synopsis of the Shakti? Because it's a feminist.
They are all feminist. Sita's Daughters is too. Shakti basically looked at the way language and patriarchy diminish women. So I took 2 characters from mythology, 2 from middle history, Rani of Jhansi and Mirabai, and 2 from the 90s, people who were alive then, and they were the remnants of the Chipko movement, and 4 sisters in Kerala who had just committed suicide, leaving a note on their shirts saying, we do not give you permission to treat us as dowry objects. And it moved me very deeply, that suicide. So it's set in a museum where a male curator brings this woman and for every introduction looks into it and says, so-and-so, wife of so-and-so, daughter of so-and-so, mother of so-and-so, and adjusts the mannequin. And slowly the mannequin starts rejecting these definitions. And by the 3rd scene, throws away the book and the curator and starts telling her own story. So that was how it was done.
And you also learned martial arts to perform
I did,
as Rajaji Rani.
I did, because I thought, unlike many artists, I don't say I'm a Bharatanatyam dancer, therefore this story needs to be told in Bharatanatyam. I was very fortunate that I learned many things as I was growing up, both in school and in Darpana. So I did puppetry and I did shadow puppetry and all sorts of things. So when I'm creating work, I try and go into it and decide 2 things. Who is the audience and what is needed to tell the story? So over the years, I've ended up learning many forms in order to tell a story. Kalaripayat was one, but much more recently, I learned how to play the chenda. So in many senses, my learning process is determined by what I want to say and whom I want to say it to.
Oh, that's lovely. You take it very, very seriously. Well, we have another common friend, is Harsh Mandel.
Of course.
Harsh has also been my guest at my home, and really, when I heard him first, I almost felt like Gandhi was speaking to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the kind of empathy.
Absolutely.
And
love.
And love which he has. And he was invited instantly in Goa by the church to teach the priest empathy. So that is lovely.
I can imagine.
And
Harsh and I have been fellow soldiers.
And based on his book, you have created this Unsuni.
Unheard voices.
Unheard voices. So speak to us about this project because that really fascinates me.
You know, when my two children were growing up, I would be talking to their friends, and I realized that unlike my children with whom I discussed current affairs and I discussed the state of India and the state of the world, for the friends who were really children of educated professionals and lawyers and so on, they thought the biggest choice in life was between one brand of shoes and another. And I thought, if we want them to be the leaders, they have to know what the reality is. And that's when Harsh sent me a copy of his book, Unheard Voices, which has 20 case studies of people he has met over his journey as an IAS officer. And these were all people who willy-nilly were pushed into becoming change makers for communities. And I thought this was the perfect material. So the show targeted towards elite schools and colleges, from where the so-called leaders of industry, the leaders of politics, the leaders of everything were supposed to come. And we packaged it so that it was attractive for them. We did it in Hindi or English. And we did it pro bono in 120 institutions across the country. And we started an Unsuni project where children could become volunteers for change. And as many as 30 institutions became volunteers for change. And I'm very happy to say that 15 years later, at least 5 of these schools still have a section which was inspired by Unsuni, where they give the same education to the underprivileged. And the education is exactly the same as those paying lakhs of rupees. And it was a deeply moving and hope-raising project for all of us.
I think I would definitely like to have it performed here at Museum of Goa eventually when COVID goes off. You know, you have been a very brave woman. You have taken on power. You have been sort of when you have been opposing Mr. Modi when he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, and you continue to do that. You had public interest litigation after the riots. You know, usually when people come, you'll be surprised that quite a large percentage of people coming to Museum of Goa are from Gujarat. And my question to them usually is, "Aap kahan se Gujarat se ho? Gandhi ke Gujarat se ho ya Modi ke Gujarat se ho?" And if I ask you that question, I know that you are from Gandhi's Gujarat. So, let us basically talk about the current situation, especially Stan Swami. In Goa, we are very much disturbed. We have a large Catholic community here. And a priest with so much of empathy and who has done so much of work, who has been sort of imprisoned and he died. And we have another friend of ours, Anand Teltumbe, who is also...
and Professor Sai Baba, also very sick.
Very, so,
and it's not even that, it's the repression of the independent voice in the name of Hindutva that is so wrong. Hinduism is based on questioning. Vedantic philosophy is about questioning. The Upanishads are about questioning. Democracy is about questioning. And to be put into jail because you question something, and look at it from Natasha Narwal to Father Stan Swami. Look at them. My friend Akhil Gogoi has just come out of jail, and he was elected an MLA while he was thrown into jail because of the CAA and protests. Look at the number of people from Pinjra Tod who were thrown in. You know, any of us could be thrown into jail and then let out 10 years later, 15 years later, because there is no case against us. Yeah. It's a horrifying situation of repression, and anybody who does not take it seriously, I think, is becoming an ostrich in this country. You say Goa is concerned because Father Stan Swami was a Catholic. Nonsense. He was a human being, and I object because he was a human being who was not allowed to question. It is our most fundamental right. If we call ourselves a democracy, we can't be a democracy if we just have a little black mark every 5 years. We have to reclaim democracy, and you can only reclaim democracy if you, A, know who your MLA is, you know who your representative is, and you hold them questionable. I mean, look at Goa. You vote for somebody and the next day they change parties.
Mass defection. The highest number of cases in the court in Delhi are from Goa.
But what I'm saying is, how can you not hold those people responsible? You vote for an ideology. You don't vote because I like your kurta. Yeah. Surely. And you are prostituting all of us who have voted for you. And I think the right to recall has to be brought in. And this is a travesty of everything that is called democracy. We are a democracy not even in name anymore. With the large-scale buying of of elected officials, the large-scale buying pre-election that goes on, is horrifying.
Yeah, I think it's really very shameful what's happening in the country, and I think.
And each of us is responsible.
Huh?
Each of us who does not speak up is responsible.
And most artists do not speak up. Now, let us talk about art as a weapon, as a political weapon. Because I basically believe that art has to be political. When there is bombing happening, you don't sit in your studio and paint flowers. You have to be...
Unless the flowers are dying.
Unless the flowers are dying. So you have to be responsive. And I get very surprised when recently one of the very famous Bollywood stars, when he was asked to give an opinion, he said, no, I'm an actor, I'm an artist, I'm apolitical.
You cannot. Listen, in today's world, what you eat is a political act. What you wear is a political act. The kind of spectacles you use is a political act. We are back in Swaraj. I mean, if I'm wearing branded clothes, then I am a goon of the capitalist brand managers. If I wear khadi or if I wear something that's hand embroidered, I am making a statement. If I don't wear silver, but I wear a bangle that is sculpted by a sculptor friend of mine, that is a political statement. If I try and eat locally, that is a political statement.
You are a complete walking, talking political
No,
statement.
but what I'm saying is anybody saying I am apolitical is a liar.
That basically means that he's scared
It's a
of power.
cop-out. It's a cop-out.
He's scared of power and he wants to basically have a little tongue and the fit of the power. Yeah.
But you know, if you want to be open, you have to realize that all your monies will dry up.
Yeah.
All grants will go. In my case, all invitations to perform will go. Yeah. Nobody in any official position will take a phone call from you. You have to be prepared for that. Yeah. And your staff has to be prepared for that. Yeah. And the staff that is scared has to go. Yeah. So, I mean, I have lived through this for 20 years.
Yeah. No, really admire you for that. And I think you are one of the, very few brave voices against what is happening in the country today. I wish more and more people take inspiration. You
know what I am really hopeful about? Yeah. What happened during the CAA. The kind of people who came out. It went across the country. Muslim women coming out, young children coming out. It was the most hopeful sign of our democracy that I have seen in many, many, many years.
Well, I must quote a little bit of a Gandhi. People who feel that they will not speak out because they are scared can never be happy. Gandhi has a very interesting formula for happiness. He says you can be happy only when what you think, what you speak and what you do
are congruent.
In harmony.
Are congruent.
If that is not there, cannot be, and all of us have to be political, because if you breathe in political air, you have to breathe out political art.
But you do realize that even what we consider happiness is juggled by brand managers.
Absolutely, yes. Well, many times pleasure is equated with happiness and sold to us in a package.
Or a new car.
As a new car. Thank you, Mallika. It was lovely talking to you. I think we'll have many more such sessions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.